Welcome to Critical Thinking in the Age of AI. This is a series that I conceived of as a teaching fellow at Harvard. If you're new here, I'm Shay. I'm a PhD candidate at Harvard, and I am so excited. The internet's most in-demand person is here with me today. The second I announced I'm releasing my series, Critical Thinking in the Age of AI, it seems like the entire internet was tagging Matthew to come on and speak with me. So I am super excited. So Matthew, for those who are not chronically online and on threads, who are you and why are you so in demand in this era?
Wow. Yeah, well now I feel like I have a lot of pressure to live up to this.
No pressure.
Yeah, I'll try my best. So I'm Matthew
Mhm.
Facciani. I am a social scientist, and for the last few years I've been working at the University of Notre Dame in their computer science department. So it's been a great opportunity to merge my social science background, but also work directly with computer scientists who have been studying AI. So I've been in this area for a few years now.
And you just had an amazing book just come out. Tell us a little bit about the book and how you conceived of the project.
Yeah. So my new book is titled Misguided, and it's all about why we are susceptible to misinformation and what we can
Mm-hmm.
do about it. So I dive into the social psychology of how these beliefs form that makes us biased to want to believe certain falsehoods, certain
Mm-hmm.
misinformation that we are exposed to. But then I
Yeah.
dive into how all these other factors interact with that process, such as social media, artificial intelligence, trust in
Mm-hmm.
institutions. And I try to break down both the individual level of this social psychological process that I talked about with
Yeah.
identities and personal networks. But I also dive
Mm-hmm.
into these like big picture social media, institutions, health, science, all that stuff. So I try to tackle it from different levels and have it hopefully synergized together so it tells an interesting story.
Yeah, and I, for one, am so excited about this book because I've been following you for quite a while. I think a couple of years. So the second people started tagging you, I was like, of course we're gonna talk to Matthew. Who else would I talk to? So yeah, let's get right in it. I like treating this session as sort of when you have like a guest lecturer in class. Like people have been hearing from me for a while, but I think the insight that you're about to provide us with is going to be so good. So in Misguided, which is your new book, which I highly recommend everyone pick up, you trace the roots of today's misinformation explosion. So I'm very curious, how has the rise of generative AI specifically changed the way false narratives are created and disseminated compared to pre-AI eras?
Yeah, great question. I think the biggest thing is just scale and volume. I mean, we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing how easy it is to create
Yeah.
falsehoods and spread them in a way that reach many more people. And the content itself that's created is much more high quality. So instead of like
Yeah.
a meme or a weird post that you might see from a social media bot, now
Mm-hmm.
that bot has this access to this AI chat bot that allows it to write really persuasive and compelling narratives. So you can have it
Yeah.
say whatever you want. You might actually have encountered some of these in the wild on threads or on,
Mm-hmm.
whatever social media you use. You can see them right in this way that it looks a little off, but
Yeah.
it can still trick you a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
Even people that are familiar with this stuff, like myself, I still have to pause and think and like, wait a second, what is this person saying? And I look at their account and their replies, and then they say like very similar things, and it's like, okay,
Yeah.
they've been programmed to write, some kind of response that creates outrage or controversy.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just constantly replying. But sometimes people are like that in
Yeah.
real life, so it's a little hard to know.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think one thing I really love about your book is that you oftentimes talk about the psychological beliefs that we
Hmm.
really want emphasized or seen within the internet landscape. So, like certain things like confirmation bias, fear, identity, all these different things that we as human beings naturally have, misinformation sort of exploits that belief system, whatever it may be. So I'm
Right.
really curious in hearing more. So how does AI sharpen these psychological hooks in many ways? And what critical thinking habits can viewers cultivate to resist them? Because we're human at the end of the day. Like you have certain
Right.
beliefs, you want something to be so true that you eventually become very susceptible to, yeah, what's happening.
Yeah, and that's one of the central themes of my book is that we are social creatures. We're motivated to protect
Mm-hmm.
our social groups. We want community. We want to connect with people. And those are very good qualities and those are very good
Yeah.
things. It's just that sometimes those motivations to belong to a social group might make us more likely to reject certain information that challenges that social group, for example.
Yeah.
So being mindful of those biases that we have is really important. We can try to like think about how our identities intersect with each other. If we're, you know, deriving a lot of self-esteem from a narrow set of identities and really worrying about just
Yeah.
one particular identity over others, and then trying to diversify them as best we can. So that's kind
Yeah.
of more on like what we could do about to try to protect ourselves is both awareness of how these processes take place, but then trying to create more balance in our own lives and our own networks and how we interact with. With AI, it just basically makes this process more challenging because it can create a very personalized experience for us and exploit
Yes.
those identity biases. So just like social media algorithms can give us content that it thinks we might want to click on and maybe get upset about, so we spend more time on the social media platform, artificial intelligence takes us up yet another notch. And it
Yeah.
provides even more personalized content that looks at all of our data, analyzes it, and says, okay, this is what Shay or Matthew is going to want to click on. And it keeps feeding us that loop. And that's really the big issue is these identity biases are most powerful when they're reinforced with each other and amplify each other through some other thing, such as your personal networks or other
Yes.
identities that amplify them or technologies that amplify them. So that amplification process and that reinforcement process, that's really where a lot of these dangers lie. And unfortunately, that's what social media and AI can help facilitate as well.
So I want to sort of go into the minds of people who are sort of on the fence about AI. They've seen some good use cases. They've seen some not, too good. I mean, quite frankly, horrible use cases of AI. And right now, there's just like a lot of AI slop that is on people's timelines, as well as the rise of deep fakes, which are either like actual videos of people, that are generated through AI or voice deep fakes. I feel like there's not enough conversation on how, like, fake phone calls of, from people that sound like a sibling or a friend or someone very close to you is also, coming up on the internet. And in many ways, it felt like this is like something from the movies, like a sci-fi, plot line. But in reality, like that is our, reality right now. So I'm interested in some examples of deepfakes you might have seen either on the internet or in your research, and how you think platforms should actually be handling this deepfake problem. Because I think one thing I'm finding with what I'm seeing in terms of deepfakes is that they're speaking to like just general human desires, going back to that psychological belief. So like people want to be, have a good economic standing. So you'll see a deepfake that's like, this famous person says this is the best way to make $1 million.
Right.
And
Yeah,
it's like,
right.
it's
Yeah.
feeding into that innate desire. So I'll stop rambling, but I really want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think you already touched on some big ones. Is like the audio deepfakes, I think, is a really big one that isn't as talked about as enough, I don't think, because it's not as provocative as seeing like the fake videos. But the audio is really good, and it's easier, it's cheaper to make those audios, and you can just overlay it on whatever type of video you want. So, one thing that platforms can do is demonetize these clearly AI generated slop that's like spreading all over their platforms, and people are trying to make money off of falsehoods, but also just like really lazy AI slop that just makes everyone's experience worse. So trying to identify the AI, which is a challenge to actually verify that people use the AI. And I know technologists are working on that. So that's like one big thing, is just identifying it. And then another thing is, reducing those incentives. So, not paying people who create this AI slop and not allowing them to make, tons of money doing so. But I mean, there's huge challenges in doing that. But there's, it's really important that we do, because these have such pressing issues for so many different things. Like the political thing and the news aspect is a really salient one, where people make up news stories or make up a politician saying something that they didn't say. Those are really big issues. Another one that is really troubling to see is deepfakes attacking women and harassing women. I think that's one that I hope we can get bipartisan support to get rid of those types of deepfakes, and make sure that that's not allowed on these platforms. So, that's the real challenge, is getting these platforms to behave in ways that are ethical and meeting the needs of the community.
Yeah. And, speaking of community, I always say that the AI industry and AI as a whole is moving at such a fast pace
Hmm.
that, we can't wait for the normal means of like regulation and legislation to start acting on protecting our communities or protecting your communities if you're listening to this, right? So I'm very interested in learning more about community led solutions while we, hopefully wait in positive expectations for, legislators and social media companies to sort of think about creating these guardrails, because I know there are some grassroots, for example, when it comes to misinformation as it spreads really quickly on the internet, there are some grassroots fact checking and
Hmm.
digital literacy campaigns to make sure that, people actually understand, what could be AI and what could be a falsehood.
Right.
But can you share some inspiring examples from your research where community initiatives have successfully pushed back against AI amplified falsehood?
Yeah, so there's several examples that come to mind. One more broadly are the community-led activism for promoting digital literacy and AI literacy in schools. So we're seeing
Mm-hmm.
that in like New York State, for example, and other
Yeah.
states are introducing this. So I think that's a really cool one to see, parents and people of these communities, advocate and reach out to their representatives and say, like, this is an important
Mm-hmm.
issue. We want these schools teaching these things, and we
Yeah.
want, to provide the resources for teachers to do that. So on the education front, I think that's a big one. And then also there are a lot of grassroots efforts with musicians, artists, writers,
Mm.
authors organizing to protect their work and demand transparency from these AI companies. I think that's another
Yeah.
big one, and we should definitely support these content creators who are trying to navigate this world and not have their work stolen and
Mm-hmm.
misused and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
there are definitely initiatives and we need to support them. I think they're really critical.
Mm-hmm.
And then another thing I'd like to see is universities and computer science departments and technology companies working directly with people and their communities and
Yeah.
actually like asking them what their concerns are about AI and how they can use AI better in their lives. I feel like that's
Mm-hmm.
a big missing component. Sometimes these companies focus so much on shareholder value that they miss actually addressing the needs and concerns of the people using their product. So I would
Yeah.
definitely like to see that as well.
Yeah, I'm really happy you mentioned that because I always talk about the release of ChatGPT in November of 2022 and how it almost like was released with zero guardrails,
Hmm.
zero like instruction
Right.
manuals, like zero best practices. Like, people were just like, oh my gosh, like let me get my hand on this new technology and like, test it out. And because it had a, free tier to it, it seems like a lot of people just went like head in first. And
Yeah.
then, now some people are like, drawing back and they're like, oh wait, like let's actually consider like, the impact of this technology. So you're definitely right. I think there has to be ways that we can incorporate the voices of people who are not traditionally in tech to be, more involved in the shaping of our AI features. Because guess what? I mean, I feel like like we're all going to be shaped by this new AI world and
Hmm.
economy we're living in. So I always say, like, why not include more people? And, if they don't include us, I always say that, we just create our own systems and
Hmm.
our own ways of having our voices heard to make sure that the future we're striving for is not a singular future shaped for
Yeah.
us. So that's really exciting to hear. So the next question I have, because I think when we talk about misinformation and figuring out ways to get rid of it, on the flip side of that is also the question of censorship.
Hmm.
And, especially given our current political climate and the fast paced nature of I think, it can get really thorny to balance moderation with censorship. So, how do you propose striking that right balance between upholding freedom of speech and expression while also making sure that we protect vulnerable people and populations who are targeted by AI driven fraud or conspiracy campaigns, or even just like AI driven campaigns in general? Because now it's easier
Hmm.
than ever to spread information about someone, whether it's true or.
Right. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean it's a really tough challenge, and I think
Yeah.
all these types of conversations are really important. And as we dive into the nuances of like what works best, this is going to be an evolving process. For me, I try to think of a harm reduction approach, thinking about how, these companies have a lot of power, they have a lot of influence, they're not especially motivated to change things that reduce their bottom line. So trying to do whatever we can to reduce harm in whatever ways we can, I'm definitely an advocate for. Trying to be realistic about what they're actually going to do. So, a lot of times they might want to fund media literacy or pre-bunking initiatives, and that's a good thing, even though it's only a small piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
As far as content moderation, it's tricky, and I think we should advocate for the most user control that these platforms are willing to give. So, like Blue Sky is a newer social media that really allows the user to see, to change what they see in their feeds, so they can change their algorithm. They can, really have a lot of influence on the type of content they see and what is boosted to them. And if each person has that much power over what they see, then that gives them a lot more control. And I think that's a good direction to go, is giving people more tools, more opportunities to influence what they see. Maybe they want to see everything, and that's great, then they can go and do that. But maybe other people don't, and they have that option. So that freedom to give people choice is really important. But beyond that, I think transparency is huge. And that's like a central theme with a lot of these tech companies, is advocating for transparency of how these algorithms and AI models work and how they're built and how content moderation decisions are made. I think that's one of the big frustrating things, is whenever there is content moderation, it's really unclear how they came to this decision. Like, was it just AI? Was it some people, against a particular topic? A lot of times we don't really know, and we only know after the fact. So it'd be really great if, they would be transparent about their process and why they made certain decisions. I know that might be a little idealistic, but that's what I hope we can advocate for, is transparency and accountability with these major platforms, because they have so much influence. So I think they do have an obligation to try to be responsible and transparent as best they can.
No, I'm really happy you mentioned that, because now I'm thinking about a lot of people who are in the educational space. So either the university system, and they're just like, oh my gosh, like, the worry that a lot of students, and without a doubt, there is evidence of that. A lot of students, relying heavily on AI to complete assignments and finish their college degrees. But then there's also educators who are worried at the K through 12 level as well, where, there's this desire to make education, quote unquote, more personalized and more efficient. But then also realizing that some of these, or not some, I mean, I think at this point, all of them, some of these foundational LLM models, which give us like, ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini, have the ability to hallucinate, right? So like how, if I'm an educator and I'm like, okay, Matthew, I'm really worried about like, how do I protect my students from hallucinations? Because hallucinations of the AI chatbot in many ways can be the starting point for the spread of misinformation, right? People just taking what they got from the chatbot and then turn it in as an assignment, or even worse, posting it on social media without any guardrails. So what would you say to those?
Yeah, I mean, I think education is definitely something that is, like you said, we just, ChatGPT kind of threw this model out here and was like, let people figure it out instead of giving any kind of guardrails. And I worry that this particular group of students, in the early 2020s, especially coming out of COVID and now coming into ChatGPT, they are in a tough spot, because educators are trying to scramble and catch up on how to best use these technologies in the classroom, and there's a lot of confusion, not a lot of consensus over what's best practices. So I really worry about this current group of students, because I think eventually educators will figure it out. I think there will be more resources, there will be more trial and error, and we will learn how to use these tools in the classroom effectively, how to teach the limitations effectively. But right now we're still figuring it out. So I would like to see more discussion of using them effectively by knowing the limitations, teaching about how they're made, like what the training data, what does it even look like? How to, like, a lot of times I feel like it's just discussed as this black box where you type in something, it gives you an answer. We don't really talk about like how it got that answer.
Exactly.
And how you can very quickly change the answers that will be given based on the training data. Like, it's pretty remarkable how that can be something that can be manipulated so quickly. definitely a lot of discussion about limitations and how to use it in a way that promotes education.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, I mean, we do learn best by actually doing the hard cognitive work of like thinking through problems. So, yeah, the worst way to learn is just, ask ChatGPT, write an essay about, American history in this time period, and boom, you did your history paper. But it's like, did you actually learn anything about that? Like if you sometimes you might not even read it. You're just like, oh, this looks good. I don't see any typos. So, I did the assignment.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, it's a big challenge.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'm curious, yeah, if you want to share any thoughts you have on it as well.
Yeah, so I always say that you should demonstrate the use of AI within the classroom. So when it was released to us, I was a teaching fellow in the college at Harvard, and the head of my teaching course was, she was like, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to put the readings through ChatGPT, tell it to summarize and do the assignments. Then we printed out copies of ChatGPT's responses, and then we had the students go through. I can't remember. No, I don't think we told it was ChatGPT. Oh no, I think we did tell them, or we told them a bot did it. I don't think we specifically used the word ChatGPT.
Okay.
And we were like, critique what this bot produced. Hopefully, you guys actually did the readings.
Yeah.
This was like really early days. And then we went through, and then we eventually explained like these were our lesson goals for the week. This was the purpose of the assignment. This was the learning outcomes. And do you see how deficient ChatGPT was in actually doing that? Like, you see the nuances you missed, the meaning, the substance of it. And I think, college students, especially today, are in a very tricky spot. And I don't believe in shaming students, whether they're in college or in K through 12 or a lifelong learner. I don't think shaming them is a helpful technique at all. I think demonstrating to them how the tool can be used and how it shouldn't be used is more effective in the classroom than just like blindly giving them the tool and be like, hey, use it. And also just like completely banning it. Because that's the thing, people have free will. They're going to find a way to use it. I mean, just like any technology. But I always say like, okay, I just want you to be an informed user or a conscientious objector. Wherever you land on AI, I just want you to do it from an informed position. Yeah, that's definitely my take. I'm getting too carried away because, you're the expert here. And I really want to talk about the different ideas and solutions that you put forward in Misguided, because I think especially now this book is so needed across, every industry. It's like, okay, how can we effectively make sure that we're not spreading something that's false? So whether it's a company that uploaded everything to ChatGPT and like ended up quoting something wrong, or relying on your history lessons with ChatGPT. So I'm really interested in like maybe just a few actions that people can take today, whether they're just informed citizens, they're tech workers, they're policymakers, they're students. What should those people be doing in order to stop the spread of misinformation, especially in the age of AI?
Yeah, so there are a few things that I think could help. On an individual level, like we discussed before, recognizing and understanding our own social and psychological biases, I think, is a great first step. I mean, like, it's critical and it's ongoing. Constantly reflect on our own biases, why we might be motivated to confirm a certain belief. What does that say about us? Like, constantly be evaluating our own emotions too. So, if something online makes us really angry or really upset, try to understand where that anger is coming from. And also, if the thing we're reading is trying to mislead us and generate that anger, since, as we talked about, there's this motivation to keep us online and keep us engaged. So sometimes, we're going to be reading stuff that might not be truthful because its goal is to keep us online and, getting that ad revenue. So understanding our social and psychological biases, through my book or other people's books and work, like, there's a lot of work in this area. And I think it's really important for us individually to understand that. And that should be partnered with media and digital literacy skills. So understanding the limitations of these AI tools, try to understand, where deepfakes are going. And there's a lot of free resources understanding how to promote media and digital literacy. So take advantage of those resources, advocate for the nonprofits doing this work and creating that content. I think is another really big thing, and supporting, science communicators and people who do this work, oftentimes for free, to try to allow as much good information in our information ecosystem as we can to try to
Mm-hmm.
balance out some of the falsehoods and misleading stuff. So that's kind of some of the individual components. Then I also think about the community level. I think that's a really
Mm-hmm.
critical level as well. So I mentioned some of these grassroots efforts. Those are really important to support these ethical AI initiatives, protecting musicians and artists and content creators with their
Mm-hmm.
work, and also trying to advocate. This is more for institutions, but I
Mm-hmm.
think one of the big things that could help is if institutions work more directly with their communities and have more
Yes.
partnerships within their communities. So there's a mutual level of trust where you can see
Mm-hmm.
what they're doing, how these physicians and scientists, how they're making these recommendations, why they're coming up with these ideas. You can trust them because you actually get to know them. And then on the institutional side, they're actually seeing what their community is concerned about and how they can help
Yes.
out. And there's actually like a mutual dialogue and partnership there. I think very slowly that's happening in very niche areas in the United States,
Mm-hmm.
but I'd like to see that at scale. I mean, I think that should just
Mm-hmm.
be something that happens as the default. And that also connects to technology companies and
Mm-hmm.
trying to promote that level of dialogue where these technology companies actually interact with their constituents, their communities, the people using these products, and actually ask them, like, what are your concerns about Facebook or ChatGPT? How can we help
Yes.
provide guardrails?
Mm-hmm.
And I know that can slow down the shareholder growth and stuff like that. And that's the stuff that's always a challenge, right? It's really easy to
Yeah.
just throw stuff out there, make these big promises, try to get as much money as you can. And that's constantly a challenge, is to get people to slow down. So it's going to take a collective effort where we
Mm-hmm.
collectively say, hey, we care about the future of our society and our species, and we want to pause sometimes and reflect on what's best for all of us. That's definitely a big part of it, and really just trying to advocate for better transparency and accountability with technology companies, policymakers, really just pushing through as much transparency as we can and
Yeah.
constantly advocating for that. So, supporting your local representatives who
Mm-hmm.
are going to fight on your behalf for transparency and accountability. So really supporting people who are in that space of trying to navigate this rapidly evolving technological landscape as best we can.
Amazing. Well, to end on a good note, how can we support you? Where can people find you if they want to learn more about your work and how you're tackling some of these issues?
Yeah, so you can definitely support me by buying my book,
Mm-hmm.
Misguided. It's now available at all major book retailers, so you can look at your major retailers for it. You can also ask your local bookstores to order a copy if you want to support them, which I
Mm-hmm.
definitely advocate. And I also have a podcast and newsletter also called Misguided, where I dive into these issues regularly, interviewing different guests, such as yourself, who are doing really cool work. So, I try to promote this content through my own platform as
Mm-hmm.
it constantly evolves. So like, I'm really grateful I was able to write my book and get my research out there and other people's research out there. But this is going to be constantly evolving and we need to keep up on it. So that's
Yeah.
what I try to do with my platform. So I have my newsletter, my podcast, and then I'm also most active on Threads and Blue Sky. I'm trying to do a little bit more Instagram as well. And you can just find
Nice.
me at my name, as well as my name, MatthewFacciani.com, for all my recent work.
Amazing. Well, Matthew, it was such a pleasure to speak with you. I know people are going to love this conversation. And yeah, I'm just so excited. If you're listening or watching this, please be sure to subscribe and support this channel so that we can still keep on producing content like this and make sure that no one gets left behind in this new age of AI. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you again, Matthew.
Thank you. It was great.